Welcome to Live from HCIC 2023, a podcast series bringing you front row insights from the industry's brightest minds. In this 12-part series, we delve into the heart of the trends impacting health systems with leading experts, senior executives, and thought leaders, as recorded live at the Healthcare Internet Conference in November of 2023. This series is brought to you by Greystone, Bowstring Media, and Touchpoint Media. Listen in as we hear from our industry leaders on the latest innovative strategies and efforts that are shaping our space. Hi, we're recording here live at the HCIC Expo Hall, so don't mind the background noise, but I am here with a dear friend of mine, Martha Van Berkel. Martha, it's so great to see you in person. I've known you for a number of years, but to meet in person, this is our second time, and it's awesome. Before we get started in today's conversation, love for you to share with people that are watching or listening in a little bit about who you are. Share them a little bit about yourself and schemaapp.org.
Sure. So my name is Martha Van Berkel. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Schema App. I grew up in enterprise, though, so I understand big companies, slow IT, all those challenges. I grew up at Cisco. I spent 14 years there. I am Canadian, so you'll hear me say A. I love my poutine. I'm an LA Kings hockey fan, so you can imagine how much fun it is that there's a Gretzky statue just across the way. And I run this company called Schema App, and we specialize in translating web content to be understood by search engines. And holy smokes, with all this AI stuff, the work we do is even more relevant. And so it's really just exciting to be able to share sort of what's happening across the board and sort of how you stay relevant in this changing landscape.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? I mean, as I thought about, this with the introduction of these open platforms like ChatGPT and Bard and other things like that, it's going to dynamically shift the way we actually search for things, and the implications of that on SEO are significant and profound. And I know you're the expert on SEO. Talked with you about it before in the past.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, first of all, maybe share a little bit about Schema and how that plays its role in SEO. But then let's bridge the gap to how does this work with generative AI solutions?
Yeah, and how do you need to think about this as a strategy versus a tactic? Okay. So I think that's a big kind of change that's happened just in the last couple months. So when we talk about the word schema or schema markup, it's basically data that you put on your site that literally says what is this page about and how is it related to other things on that website or sort of in the world. And why it's relevant is it's actually how you just translate something from English to Spanish or English to French. You're actually truly explaining or translating for machines. So this is a vocabulary that Google, Yahoo, and Bing came up with in 2011. So it's not new, but it's actually a dictionary of all the things they want to know about physicians, what they want to know about your medical procedures, about content, about anything.
Right.
And what's cool about it is it's also this I talk about a marketing data layer or a control point for you to make sure that they understand the context of your content. So no one questions investing in content, no one questions investing in physician profiles, but in this new world, if you haven't translated it to be understood by the machines, not just the humans but by the machines, then you're just not ready.
Right. Well, you're flying. Let's say you're not optimized to the best you can be.
Absolutely.
Right?
You're missing this whole channel. Yeah. And it's a significant channel, right? Because today, we think of SEO as how do I optimize for Google? Mm-hmm. But I really believe that's going to become so fractured, because as long as large language models or, an application has access to that data, which by the way they do, because they're scraping your website or they're reading your schema markup, all these different things are going to try to be that digital front door. So your digital front door isn't just your website anymore. And I would say it's not going to just be Google. It's going to be Bing. It's going to be name, startup 160, right? That's going to be wanting to own that interaction between you.
Siri, Alexa, all of these things suddenly now are ways that people could start to access your content. And you have to be really hyper-focused on making that content understandable by all these different machines.
Yeah.
So you mentioned large learning models, right?
Yeah.
Which is a very important part of all of these generative AI solutions.
That's right.
Talk a little bit about large learning models and how they interface with Schema.
Sure.
How does that work?
So let me break it down into a couple pieces to where I get to that punchline.
Okay.
So when you optimize a web page with Schema Markup, let's talk about a physician, right? So I'm saying like, it's a physician, this is their name, this is their description, this is where they graduate from medical school, these are the services they provide, this is their specialty, this is their rating, right? So I've explained what those things are, but I actually want to also then connect that to the overall site. And so ideally, if when I'm talking about the medical specialty it has, I'm actually like defining that with, let's say, Wikipedia or the specialty page that you have on your website. If I'm explaining, this is the hospitals they work at, I want to make sure that we're actually like connecting the dots to say, oh, this is a physician. And by the way, the hospital that it works at is described on this page. So you notice that I'm not just talking about optimizing one page. I'm saying, how is that page then connected? When you connect those dots, right, you can then answer questions like, I have breast pain and I want to see a female physician who has an appointment on Tuesday, November, whatever, who should I go see?
Right. And this is through Schema. You can start to associate these connections.
Exactly. So I know what the physician is, I know what their language is, I know what services is, and I know what hospital they work at, and I know where that location is based on your location. Therefore, I'm going to then send you to, Dr. Patel, who works for, X hospital, et cetera. So the reason I explain that is that when you do those connections, you're actually building something called a knowledge graph.
Mm-hmm.
And knowledge graphs are basically, where you're defining with a common vocabulary, which is schema.org, this vocabulary created by the search engines, and with what the relationships are amongst many things. Mm-hmm. And when you can do that, you can start to infer things or figure things out. Well, guess what? That's what large language models do.
It's exactly what large language models do.
So, but large language models have hallucinations and don't have data to be trained.
They try to guess these connections.
Right. So when you match a large language model with a knowledge graph, you actually reduce the risk of hallucinations because it can query all these connections to make correct inferences. So there's some really cool papers written about like how large language models and knowledge graphs are an ideal situation because they actually are the best of both worlds. They're like the large language models inferencing without all the hallucinations.
Yeah, you're basically using Schema to educate these open platforms, their large learning models, on the right data.
And reducing your risk of getting the wrong answer to your consumer, which like then has other implications, right?
Now suddenly you open up your door to all of these generative solutions that they're introducing, like Bard, that now I have permanently used whenever I'm using Google. I have Bard running, right? And I'm interested to see their results compared to my Google results. And now ChatGPT, it being integrated into Bing, and all of it, we're going to start to see now searching changing.
Well, and I always like to think about like what's the motivation of the search engines, right? Like, so like that, this is like how we can reduce risk, how we can make sure we're understood. Well, the search engines, like their biggest cost is around indexing and crawling data. And their biggest risk is that they get the answer wrong and then someone doesn't click through or they lose that like user's engagement and then don't make paid ad dollars, right? Visible paid ad dollars. So this is a win-win. Like building your knowledge graph helps search engines more easily access your information and it helps you reduce risk. And there's been lots of, I would say, confirmations like by Google, whether it be in their search update in October, or someone actually mentioned to me this morning that one of their spokespeople at Brighton SEO conference that also happened in September, they're saying like, do Schema Markup to help your content be understood, find a solution that allows you to be agile with it because it's going to be changing quickly. And most importantly, also that it's like truly helps them do their job better.
Right.
Like good news for me, like my company does Schema Markup at scale, right? But like we're seeing this and it's, I spoke at a conference in September where I got to spend some time with the program manager for the new Bing. His name's Fabrice Canal. And after my presentation, he was like, you get it. And I was talking about how do we help enterprises build this marketing data layer using Schema Markup. So all of a sudden, we talked about this being SEO. This is much bigger than SEO, right? Like this is your AI marketing strategy because once you do this for SEO, good news, like you also then can reuse that knowledge graph to train your large language models or to be sort of like the primary way that you're grounding whatever service is interacting with you. Right. So it's a really cool way for like I'll say strategic, leaders to kind of say, hey, I'm solving the AI problem while getting wins and clicks and sort of tactical work done in SEO at the same time.
Right. And, I know that this is a lot of this is how the sausage is being made. We're talking about what's going on behind the scenes, because not many people see this when they're interacting with this.
Yeah.
But as you're describing this, it really does feel now SEO, which used to be a tactic, is now through Schema, you're developing a strategy. It's almost like a discovery strategy. I'm not sure. Do you have a favorite?
I like
term?
the discovery strategy. I might adopt that.
Yeah, because it's like what you're doing is you're now saying there's going to be so many entrants into how people can find information about you. You want to be authoritative. You still want to have the right content. You want the right inferences, the right intent implied, and you don't want it to be made up. Using Schema can supercharge all of that.
Yeah, I really think we have to think of our website as a container of data in this new world. So while we think of it today and we take meticulous time to make sure the images are on brand and the buttons are in the right place, I really do think that's going to change.
Yeah.
I do think that there's going to be, the engagement and the discovery is going to happen in, whether that be ChatGPT, that's such a great example. You can see how you're asking all those questions. Yes, Bing does a good job giving you a link at the end, but what happens when the link isn't there and they're just do you want to book an appointment, and it's then just connecting to your booking API.
Right.
This whole 0-click search, which is oh no, I'm not going to actually get the click. I'm talking about bookings without people visiting your website.
Yeah.
So what are you doing to be prepared for that?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think as you think about this, my mind is racing in so many different ways because the implication is significant. You mentioned a couple of use cases, right? I think, and you've been presenting here at HCIC.
That's right, yeah.
About some of these use cases. Let's walk through that. Booking a doctor's appointment is probably one of the most important ones that you can get right.
Yeah.
And even at the last conference, I heard someone say, everybody's talking about AI, but no one's really solving the problem about booking appointments, which is really the inherent challenge. Here, it sounds like you could do both at the same time.
Well, right. And I think we have to walk before we run, right?
Okay.
AI is happening and there's disruptions happening with SGE and ChatGPT and so forth. And Google search is still Google search, right? Yeah. We have to understand, though, that under the covers of Google search, no matter what that interface is, there's lots of innovation in AI happening. And so I think when we think about booking a doctor, it's a question of when people are asking the question, right? So this is the walk piece is as consumers, I expect to be able to ask a very specific question and get an answer. And so we can still think in terms of SEO and stuff today, right? So how do we make sure that's really working and that the great investment you've made in those physician profile pages, that's converting for you, right? So that's, I think, as SEO as a tactic, Schema Markup, it's a tactic to help solve that problem. And then if you really once you nail that first piece, if you're then making sure you're asking the question to say, well, how am I starting to build the knowledge graph off of that? So I'm not just thinking of the tactic, I'm using that as a foundation or a stepping stone to kind of also future-proof. You can do both at the same time.
Yeah.
And then that way you're not sort of saying, oh, I'm going to do this and hope to goodness, when I get 4 stages of the future state that it's work. But this is something you can do, measure it, and sort of be building and future-proofing at the same time. And I think there's very few things that you can do today that that kind of have both those value props.
Yeah, that are extensible in this particular way.
Absolutely.
And who doesn't like that, right? I mean, you're doing something to solve today's problem, but you're also future-proofing yourself for the future.
And by the way, Chris, I'm pitching stuff that I pitched in 2014 called semantic search marketing that no one cared about back then. It's the same stuff, right? It just has this very important sort of timeliness now. So, and I share that because this isn't a brand new, oh, I really hope this works, or this is new tech that's really out there. This has been around for a long time.
Right.
It just is now they're talking about it. Google is specifically talking and Bing about it, saying, oh yes, by the way, all of our tech is built on this.
And that's really, that really shows what you're kind of illustrating here is even the fanciness of AI and BARD and all this stuff. It really is just they're building on this whole concept of making information easier to find and easier to answer the questions that people are looking for.
Yeah.
So we talked about Find a Doctor. What other use cases are you seeing with hospitals you're working with?
Oh, good question. I think that the thing that I'm seeing the most is like the need for, and this is again like a kind of tactic of SEO that becomes more strategic, where like most pages, like you're not thinking about kind of making those links to the other things on the page. So, an SEO will say, oh, I want to see like interlinking within the site. So we'll use the physician as the example.
Yeah.
Like I want to know like what are the like actual service lines that they work in.
Yeah.
Right.
Procedures
or so forth.
Or things that they do.
And so I want to know, like, not just list them. I want to say, like, where on the website are you talking specifically about that?
Yeah.
Or like with the hospitals, like the hospital pages, like I need context, like I want that on the page. And the reason why it's so important, like these are small things. So I want to see like links to these other pages. Oh, and by the way, I want to see like one page that talks specifically about that.
Right.
And why is that? If you have 5 pages that talk about orthopedics, if Google's trying to figure out, or the machine's trying to figure out like which page on your site am I supposed to point people for orthopedics, it has no idea which one to use.
Right.
So like specificity in sort of like having one page that's like talking in detail and then making sure that page is then connected to the related information.
Right.
And then you use Schema Markup and there's these things called properties in it. So if I'm like saying that this is the physician, I'm saying like, they, I actually remember the specific property, but like this is like where they practice at, right?
Right.
Then it's like links to the hospital page.
Or this is the department at this particular hospital, and that may be different than orthopedics across the entire service line, or across the entire health system.
So like that's just because the content is there,
the
context isn't there.
Right.
And context was like a really big theme. And so Carolina Anthony from Advent Health and I presented together. And like context is also when she's talking about like the website and the digital front door, the context of your user, the context of like who's interacting with you. It's much deeper than just like demographics, right?
Right.
There's like context of who they are, where they're at in their health journey, what kind of questions they're asking. This is the same sort of in your content.
Right. And I could see the application even going further, like if you're in an academic medical center and you have clinical trials that you want to associate with that provider, or you have they're also, head of an academic department.
Research papers,
there's so many things you can use this underlying schema to associate with. And then when you're like, the user saying, oh, I wonder who's recently done a clinical study on this particular procedure in orthopedic patients and their knees or what have you.
Boom, 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 boom. It connects the dots.
And it's connecting the right information.
That's right.
And now you don't have to worry about hallucinations. You're getting the right information here.
Yeah.
I would imagine that the reception of this has been a little bit, you mentioned this, this has been around for 10 years, right? This concept of this concept, but
people are learning about it for the first time.
Like right now.
Right now.
What do you attribute to that? Why is that happening now? Is it because of ChatGPT?
I think so. Yeah. I think so. Like, I think, I always wonder, like, why did Google, Yahoo, and Bing in 2011 invest the time to sit around a table and basically define a dictionary?
Yeah.
Right? And actually, if you look at evidence on, like, things that Google has announced, like, in 2015, it was rank math, and then like there's this thing called BERT that's about like understanding meaning, and now they're talking about neurolinguistics, right? So like all these, in my world, it's all the like, these algorithm changes and updates. They've all kind of been leading to this. And I think it hasn't been as disruptive as ChatGPT. Like my mother, who's in her 70s, is like, what's ChatGPT, right? It's like the question that comes up. And of course, my husband and I are like, okay, let's sit down, Mom. We're going to like actually get you to use it. And so you can kind of like experience this piece. And she's like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, so now I don't Google it, like I ChatGPT it. And we're like, well, no, it's like conversational and it can go do research for you. And, it can like find you, like interesting things. You can ask it questions. And, my son, we always like anonymize my son's interactions with it. But like, he was like, what money can I make when I'm a 13-year-old who likes soccer, math, and reading, right? It's like, and it's giving him ideas of like, oh, I could be a, soccer referee. So I think it's like much broader in the consumer world. So while we knew we should do it for business, like all the consumers now want it. And so especially in healthcare where the consumers are the people we're trying to be of service to, like they're leaning in and changing their behaviors. And so like we have no choice now, as organizations to say like, oh my goodness, like this is happening and they're adopting it. How do I be relevant there?
Yeah, toothpaste is out of the tube on this one, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, their expectations are already evolving and changing. Yeah. My mother doesn't really Google a lot. She does sometimes.
Yeah.
was using social media, was using Facebook to find things, right? I showed her ChatGPT. She loves it now. She's like, she's just using it to do like her own personal research.
Yeah.
It's only a matter of time for her to say, oh, now I have to go see this procedure. What's the right way for me? Like, and really start to use it for practical applications. I'm using it now to kind of connect to what are the best restaurants in Los Angeles while we're here at HCIC, but it's just a matter of time.
Well, and then you think about who the disruptors are in healthcare.
Yeah.
Right? Amazon, Walmart, right? Google. Like, these are innovators who move quickly. I frankly sometimes think they make their own rules, right?
Yeah.
And how they operate. Like, if you're thinking like, oh, I'm going to wait to see what happens, like, they're going to eat your lunch. Like, the consumers are going there to buy their eggs and milk.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if they have something urgent, they're going to do it there. Like, I don't know about you, but like, I don't go to 5 grocery shops, like, to buy my groceries. Like, if it's there, I'm going to, even if it's $1 more, I'm like, I'm going to, because like, I need the convenience of it to help me like do the things I need to get done. And so I think there's those disruptors in the healthcare kind of, I'll say, landscape should also create urgency for organizations to be like really thinking about future proofing and not hoping to goodness that like the practices they've been doing for the last 50 years are going to work.
And Schema is the way to future proof.
Absolutely.
I mean, well, that's awesome. Martha, always fun to sit down and talk to you about this. Thank you for going in, taking something a little technical and making it, clear for people, chief marketing officers and people that are leading marketing departments that may or not be too technical listening in. I think they have some great tips for them to start to look at.
We can take control. Like, it doesn't have to be scary. Right?
Exactly. I love that. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for watching live from HCIC 2023. We hope these insights have sparked new ideas and conversations. A special thanks to the industry experts featured on our show, and to Greystone, Bowstring Media, and Touchpoint Media for making these discussions available. For more episodes and exclusive content, please visit Greystone.Net, Touchpoint.health, or subscribe through your favorite podcast listening platform. If you want to be part of more conversations like this one, please make sure to attend the Healthcare Internet Conference in Austin, Texas. You can find more details at hcic.net.